panelists up. And if we just move this one. So thank you very much. And I'm joined on stage by Eugenio, by Stuart, by Scott. So we actually had a question during the IR session to ask, actually to call out, some of the failings that we saw are down to security management. And actually this session, hopefully we can start answering some of those and how we should be approaching security management as we have our sort of expert CISO and security leader panel. And we're looking at, balancing the compliance and security. So before we jump into the panel, what I might do is ask, going from my left and round, is our panelists to introduce themselves and just and give you a little bit of background so you know who we've got talking today.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, Eugenio Bonzi from Integrity 360. I'm the CRA practice manager for the CRA team in Italy.
Good afternoon. I'm Stuart Vondrum from MRI Software, and I now head up the GRC function in EMEA.
Hi, I'm Jessica T. I'm the head of compliance at LifeBit Biotech Limited, which is a genomics platform processing and analyzing data.
Hi guys, Scott Shields. I'm an engineer on from the Delinea side, from the security perspective. I work with enterprise organizations, helping them protect their infrastructure with CISOs from both a security and compliance point of view.
Brilliant. So as you see, we've got a good mix of customers, vendor partner, and expertise from Integrity 360. So at the end of the last session, we were talking about, we had Checkpoint talking about cloud. I think that's a really good place to start, particularly as it's sort of one of the key challenges and trends, that relentless growth and adoption of cloud, and something that's very much top of mind for security leaders. So it's probably a good place for us to start. And most organizations have gone through sort of a lift and shift. I think I talked about this morning, a lift and shift of their infrastructure up to the cloud, and then moving from that straight lift and shift into developing themselves to be more cloud native. And actually, we've got lucky to be joined by two of our customers that are pretty much cloud native completely as a company. So it'd be good to get a view, and maybe we'll start with Stuart, to get a view on does this approach moving from traditional on-prem to being a sort of cloud native with microservices, containers, does that change your approach as a security leader and how you approach security best practice and controls and frameworks?
It has, from the point of view of the people who are involved in it on a day-to-day basis. But as one of the speakers mentioned earlier, it's just a computer over there that you no longer hold in your own environment. In a lot of cases, that's the education that we've had to put across to people. So we're now on a stance of going back to basics. Just think about all the things that you used to do and now try and apply them in the cloud. There's some resistance, but we are gradually chipping away at it.
And do you see a sort of change in the type of people in the business that you need to be able to sort of enable that cloud journey that you've been on?
That's an interesting point, actually. Yes and no. So in terms of the skill set, so being a software company, obviously the skill set has changed, and some of the traditional operational methods and development methods have changed relative to the cloud. So in that respect, yes, the development teams that we're working with seem to be quite different. But the people that we're working with in supply chain, in management, and in all the back of house functions, no, they're the same. They're users of cloud as opposed to contributing to the infrastructure and the product.
Okay. And actually, it's probably a similar question for you, Jessica. But I know, as we spoke before, LifeBit being a entirely cloud native, born into the cloud as an organization.
Yep.
But your background is, slightly different. So, how do you see that as sort of changing? And do you have to change your approach?
So my background obviously is focused, I guess, a lot more on enterprise IT side, more traditional, large-scale organizations. And what I do tend to find, huge positive with being a cloud-native company, is that we don't really have a lot of resistance, I think, in terms of changing security practices. People instinctively understand what you're talking about. Very often I'll have these conversations with engineers and they'll go, no, I totally get what you're saying. And their first question is, how do we automate this? How do we make this faster so I don't have to do it again? Set and forget, as far as they're concerned, is the best. So I think that has been a massive shift away from, in previous lives where you literally have to drag people kicking and screaming from a security controls perspective to change their behaviors. However, the drawback obviously is, there's always an assumption that someone else is going to be taking care of it for you. In the cloud space, but that's taken care of by AWS. But when you explain it, sure, they get it. So the gap that you have to close is a lot shorter, it's a lot smaller, and they're pretty hands-on. So if you get your time, attention, amongst all the rest of the product changes that you're doing, you actually can move at speed. The problem's always getting your attention. Still the same issue.
Yeah, I suppose that's being cloud native and having those naturally more people that are more attuned to that agile approach obviously helps. You sort of actually mentioned something there about assumption that somebody else is taking care of it. Have you needed to go through a process of educating people on the shared responsibility model? And I wonder if you could sort of talk us through that a little bit more.
I think stepping through it, sometimes there are assumptions which are made. So, for example, if we were talking about from an operational resilience point of view, backups is all getting backed up, isn't it? I mean, it must be. And sometimes there is an assumption without testing that it must be because it's AWS, isn't it? Of course it works. And challenging to go through it, but okay, because from a compliance point of view, we are a customer-driven organization. We work with a lot of governments, a lot of large enterprises like pharmaceuticals who want us to evidence our compliance with various frameworks and audit standards. You can't assume. You have to produce artifacts. So that's that challenging the business to say, okay, let's go from acting to being able to prove, test and prove, and produce artifacts that you need in order to be able to demonstrate your compliance, which is a huge shift, obviously, from people who are very operationally driven, outcomes driven. That's something that they have, in a young company, not really something they're familiar with. So that's part of the journey. One of the examples where, I've had to take them through, to test some of the testing rather than just placing reliance on something that you think someone else is doing. And actually critically examining whether there are gaps in assumptions in terms of services, how we fill that, do we outsource to a third party, or do we, bring that, put that into the job description of someone in the team, for example.
And Scott, I'd like to bring you in actually, because when it comes to the cloud, identity is very much king. It's the sort of the base security element really now. As sort of a leading sort of PAM provider and authentication management provider, how are you helping customers and companies through that sort of challenge around identity in the cloud?
Yeah, so one of the key elements that I try to sort of drive home with our clients and customers is that, and to the point of like cloud environments as well, there's so many now. We're talking about whether it's AWS, Azure, GCP, different things going on. That actually now it's not really what people can do with the access that they have. It's more about taking an identity-centric approach. It's what can I do? What do I need to do? Rather than what do I have access to do? And so for that reason, we tend to recommend that people try and consolidate where they can, take more of a centralized approach, which is difficult when you're dealing with multi-cloud environments. You know, you can go out and hire a bunch of SMEs, you know, into each of these areas, but there's no central consolidation into that. You know, we're talking about, you know, assigning a permission in one tool or binding a role in another. And the SMEs, the people who are admin in this, they know what they're talking about, they know what they're doing, but it's very difficult to have a central view of what actually is going on in these different environments. But if you take an identity-led approach, you could assign central policies to what people actually need access to. You know, the classic is like a domain admin level account. That account will give you access to a lot of stuff, but the person who has access to that account is probably only using it for a certain number of tasks. So better to give it to them for the task rather than in general. And this is tooling, you know, involved with this as well. It's all making sure you've got the right tools and the right centralized policy, and making sure that people are actually, you know, utilizing it in a way that makes sense.
And Eugenia, I think as you know, as our CRA consultant and expert, you know, I think we obviously work with a lot of CISOs and organizations to take them along their journey with a cybersecurity framework like ISO 27000 or NIST cybersecurity framework. You know, with moving to the cloud, how are they adapting to be more cloud-centric? What do people need to bear in mind?
Well, you have to think that the new cybersecurity framework, the cybersecurity standard like ISO 27001, also NIST CSF, that's the new version. There are new controls related to cloud because cloud now is not the emerging technology, it's part of the infrastructure in the company. So we have to adapt our cybersecurity framework to the cloud. And for instance, in the ISO 27001, there are new controls related to the cloud, to the risk management for the cloud services, let me see, the implementing measure related to cloud services, security measure for cloud, exit strategy also, because the exit strategy is important now relating to the cloud service. So we have to adapt our cybersecurity framework, our security measure to the cloud reality, because now the cloud is a part of our infrastructure in our company.
I suppose that point about exit strategy is probably quite important. Stuart and Jessica, I don't know if I can come to you and say, is that something that you've considered in terms of you know, your use of the cloud and that exit strategy? Should you need to migrate, or is that something that you just see as being easy enough for migration of your data out of a cloud environment?
Well, our platform is built on AWS. We are actually not looking so much at an exit strategy, although we do use containerization, but going to a multi-cloud strategy where we can provide our platform on multiple cloud providers, cloud platforms. So for us, not so much an exit because of the way that we work and what we provide. I think so probably a bit less of a focus for us.
And actually, sorry, just is your, I guess more my curiosity and not a question that I've got on the card here, but your need to, or your view to be multi-cloud. Mm-hmm. What's the driver for that? Is it resilience, or is it cost, or is it region, or is it all of the above?
No, it's actually to meet the needs of our clients. So some of our clients do have preferences. We do, we explore that option for if clients want it to be on a different cloud, rather than it being, sort of the multi-cloud strategy in terms of resilience that you're talking about. But that's something that we will consider going forward as well.
Same, absolutely the same.
Yep.
Client-driven in a lot of cases, but also traditionally we've been a very, very acquisitive organisation, so we have never had the luxury, I'll call it, of choosing AWS or Google or Azure. We've bought companies that are in those environments, and the exit strategy is just too complex. When we're lifting and shifting and trying to buy new businesses, trying to win new customers, it's not been something that we've actually been able to consider, is moving huge applications out of one provider to another. It's just I think it's
Cost-
too
cost prohibitive.
complex, too cost prohibitive, yeah.
It's not only a problem of application, but also about the data, because we have a lot of data on the cloud. So also the exit strategy for our data is very, very important for us, because, let me say, now on the cloud we have mainly our company, not only data, because all our company data are on the cloud. So the exit strategy for this data are very, very important also on the privacy side.
Yep. Well, whether it's data residency, privacy issues, you know, I think in the case of whether it's any migration or exit strategies, you know, having this same evaluation in place as you were taking on a new provider, I think that's exactly the same considerations, really.
Okay, so we'll move on from cloud because we'll run out of time, and we've got definitely a few more questions to get through. And what I'd like to move on to is sort of resilience, operational resilience. We kind of talked about it earlier. It's obviously one of our key themes about how do we make ourselves resilient. You know, a lot of that's being driven by regulation and standards such as DORA and NIS2, which are EU-based standards. You know that, but will still affecting a lot of UK business, anyone financial company that needs to transact into Europe, but also service providers and ICT providers that fall under it. So I think, Eugene, if I can come to you first, to probably easiest or best thing to do is you can start to sort of outline what DORA is and why, what are the key considerations and why should we care about it?
Well, DORA is a new European regulation. So we are in UK today, we are in London, but many UK companies can be affected by DORA. What is DORA? DORA is a regulation about, is dedicated to financial sector, not only traditional financial companies, financial entities like banks, insurance, and so on, but also the new financial entities like crowdfunding platform, crypto asset service provider, and so on. So, what is the main objectives of DORA? There are two main objectives in DORA. One is to, let me say, define a common standard define a standard for manage the ICT risks in the financial sector. The other objective is strictly related to the first one, is to harmonize all the framework already present in Europe, because in the past year, every state, every European members define local framework, local rules, and so on. Now, DORA want to harmonize everything in the financial sector, and what are the main pillars in DORA? We have 5 main pillars in DORA, strictly related to ICT sector, to ICT activities. The first one is the ICT risk management. The second is the ICT-related incident management. Then we have also the ICT critical supplier risk management, operational resilience, and last but not least, that is not strictly required but is strongly recommended, is the information sharing and cooperation with all the entities involved in the DORA framework and with all the state members. So, if you take a look to these 5 pillars, we can simply say that are common to all the cybersecurity standards, all the cybersecurity framework. In this case, in Europe, the European Commission want to harmonize the approach to the cybersecurity for the fintech sector, financial sector, because it's very, very critical for the European business. And how can we, let me say, from my point of view, one of the problems of the European standard in general, GDPR, for instance, has the same problem, is that there is not a certification scheme. How can a company prove that he is compliant to DORA framework or to the GDPR framework in this case? we have to guide the company, we have to suggest the companies how to implement the cybersecurity framework and how to be compliant. In this case, if you take a look to the 5 pillars, all these matters are strictly related also to ISO 27001, for instance. So the suggestion from my point of view is to adopt ISO 27001 to prove that your company is DORA compliant.
Okay, so I mean very much that it sounds there that DORA is a reminder to do the basics correctly is something that Stuart, you kind of mentioned. And actually, Stuart, I appreciate that neither your organisations fall under the requirements for DORA or NIS2, the other directive there that's more targeted towards critical national infrastructure. But how important is organisational resilience to you? Is it something that's given focus in your business to make sure that you have that resilience in place?
Absolutely, and resilience, if you take the business continuity model of resilience, which is people, process, plant, and you put your people first, and there's been a few allusions to it already, subject matter experts, people who are familiar with terminology in AWS, and it's slightly different in Azure. And all these frameworks that Eugenia is talking about, so whether it's DORA, whether it's 27001, whether it's SOC, FedRAMP, PCI DSS, all these that we've got various people, that's one of our resilience challenges, is losing subject matter experts in a compliance area that we have to demonstrate either on behalf of our clients as part of their supply chain or in our own right. The resilience needs, for us, needs to be that we are resilient when we lose staff. And, in our industry, people are on the move all the time. It's a very fluid industry in that respect.
Yeah, and actually, I know when we spoke about this before, actually one of the concerns or the challenges, it's not just the skills, but it's really about knowledge management. Jessica?
Yeah, so in our pre-preparation calls, we had a chat about this, that one of, I think throughout my career, the most common thing I see is having a loss of organizational knowledge, the technical knowledge, and the history behind why something was implemented, what the thought process was. And, a sort of discussion around, we were talking about AI at some point in time, was around whether one of the things that we could look to in the future is AI being the memory of the organization about the what, why, how, when, where, why, of the decisions that were made from a compliance viewpoint. One of the common things that we do get questions about is, if there is a breach, whether it's from a legal terms perspective, what version did he sign up to? Does anyone remember? Does anyone have a copy of what our user signed up to at that point in time? Have they breached something? What were security policies for that individual when they signed on? I think in terms of the loss of staff, that creates a huge operational resilience challenge, especially since also in the IT space, often lots of people don't want to, can't have the time to document exactly what they have been doing. So that presents challenges in itself. And I think from our perspective, how we've looked at operational, and there's also a huge difference looking at operational resilience depending on the size of the organization. So I've worked everything from the large banks through down to scale-ups and mid-sized firms. And operational resilience looks very different to companies at different stages of their growth and scaling journey. We are a scale-up where we are right now. We have looked at, from a commercial point of view, obviously to onboard huge numbers of SMEs, huge teams, and that we actually have a fractional requirement compared with, a large bank, for example. That obviously that doesn't make sense for us to keep certain skills and in-house and certain services in-house. So obviously we've chosen to partner with some security partners around that. We've driven towards automation and testing and outsourcing. But obviously at the end of the day, you can't outsource your risk. you can only outsource actions, and that management of it still, around that still matters quite a lot in terms of effective performance.
Yeah, indeed. And you sort of mentioned that obviously we came onto that in one of our pre-prep calls as we were talking about AI, so it's probably a good segue to move on to talking about AI. Obviously, it's been mentioned a fair bit today, and I guess one of the questions I have is that something you're seeing actively used in your business? And actually, Scott, I might come to you first, actually, from a vendor perspective. The use of AI, seeing it in use within customers, how think about securing that, but also how is that being baked in to help you in terms of your products as well?
It's becoming much more popular, much more common now. It's a huge enabler for things like proactive mitigation and defense against things that would take a person a lot longer to do. Suspicious behavior detection, threat, that type of thing. Being able to sift through log files and pages of this kind of stuff to detect an anomaly. AI we'll do that quicker than any person can, but like most AI, it comes with a sort of caveat that you have to balance that with human, action or involvement as well. We use it in our tool set. We have a proactive AI algorithm that does exactly that, and a lot of our customers are implementing more tools, but they're coming to market quicker and faster as well. Different styles and different in different ways, but I think it's a huge enabler for security. I think it's a good thing, because there's this whole debate about, is it better for, the protector or is it better for the bad actor? I think I take the former view. I think it's better for us, because there's a lot more information coming in that you can utilize to have a more proactive defense and detection mechanism in place that works quicker and more effectively than people do. So I think it's important, and it's, if not already, going to become much more commonplace.
And actually, Stu, I'm going to come to you because, again, I know that AI is something that's in use actually in part of normal business operations. And I wonder if you can sort of just talk us through that kind of approach you've had to take, particularly from a compliance and from a policy perspective, to get to a point where it's where you consider it safe to use in the business.
It's been huge. The ability of a malactor to pull something out if the input hasn't been governed is such a massive risk to us with all the IP. We've got 184 products. Keeping track of that is the next challenge, just to, from a compliance and governance point of view. But we've had to really train the developers on what they can and cannot do, what they can use AI for, how they can use it. We have our own ChatGPT, our custom-built ChatGPT. They have to watch a video. They have to be signed up to the policy. Their managers are responsible for oversight to make sure that ChatGPT is being used in the correct way. Because the IP, if we lose the IP, we can lose products that, to put it in perspective, of the 184 products, we've got 13 of them are our major revenue providers. If we lost the IP on one of those, it would be disastrous for us. And so that has been the challenge. Now that we feel we're getting a handle on that, we're beginning to use it in other ways. And actually, one of the things that we've started using it for is training our incident response teams, generating scenarios and getting them to focus on getting the AI to generate scenarios, but then focus on particular elements. So we've moved on, but that was our first challenge, was that whole development scenario and how they use it. We're now looking at the next stage, as I said on that. I'm just monitoring it.
Yeah, and what was the catalyst for that, introducing and creating that sort of policy?
Believe it or not, the thing that really drove it was the Samsung episode. Most organisations are run by finance. I work for an organisation that's run by our legal team. the minute that came out, the legal team, we actually flew lawyers over from the States to symposiums in the UK around AI and policies, and it became, everything else was stopped while that was dealt with, but that was the catalyst, was the Samsung episode.
Yeah, which is interesting because obviously in the session, the Fortinet session this morning, talking about actually they'd seen the harvesting of ChatGPT credentials, and for that exact reason, being able to understand people's prompts to be able to pull out a potentially IP from there. So obviously there's a considerable risk. Joe, we are going to run out of time very quickly, so I just want to ask one question very quickly of our panel, and sort of your 15-second answer, if I could, really, on how you've seen the role of a security leader and CISO sort of change over the last 18 months, 2 years, and how do you kind of see that changing? Potentially, do you see it as going from a sort of a CISO to a BISO, so more business information security officer overall? So I'll tell you what, I might start with my left with Eugenio, and we'll work our way around.
Let me see. We were talking just a few minutes ago about this topic. We think that my opinion is that the CISO, as we know today, the technical CISO is dead. This is not the time for a technical CISO. It's time for a business CISO, a business information security operation officer. Sorry, because we have to relate our security measure to the business. Because, well, let me say just a sentence, because we don't have any more time. Without security, there is no business, but without business, there is nothing to secure.
They have to talk to so many people, they have to be a great communicator and understand everybody's objectives, because although you have an ultimate common objective as an organisation, the elements that feed into that all have their own, and they have to be able to relate to those individuals and be able to put across the information, data, cyber security, all the different elements at the appropriate time in the appropriate way.
I think I'm just going to add to what everyone else has said with a comment that I made to my sales guys. So when am I going to have my cut? I think there is a big shift, really, instead of us being seen as a cost center, from a business perspective, being seen to be a driver of value, especially in certain organizations where we are supporting the business getting business. So I think that's massively changed. I think because without us, without the compliance and certifications, often there's now no business.
I suppose that's the thing from being a blocker to an enabler. And
Yes.
Scott, I'll give you the last word before we close out.
Yep, I agree with that as well. In essence, you can look at it through another filter that it's actually a revenue generator, in that it's preventing that which would stop revenue from not coming into the organisation. But you're absolutely right. A lot of CISOs that I work with, the problem isn't that they don't understand the problems. The problem is relaying that to the business. And it's like they're asking for things in plain, simple language to identify and quantify the risk in a way that the money people and things like that will understand, so that they can get the right action. I think you're right. The technical CISO is long gone. It's now more of a business relationship kind of thing, and to relay that reality to the business. That's the biggest problems I think that we have.
Excellent. Well, we're over, and we could actually, there's plenty more questions to go, and we could talk for quite a good while. But I'm just going to say thank you to my panel of Eugenio, Stuart, Jennifer, and Scott on the end there. And I will hand you back over to Johanna. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rich, and all the amazing panelists as